if you were an owner came to you independently and said, man, I'm thinking about selling, what advice would you give him?
I would absolutely tell him to find himself a good M&A broker, sit down and think, are you ready? Why are you selling? And go through the whole financial picture with, when it's done, what does it look like for you? Will it be adequate?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Next Life Podcast, where our goal is to interview guests who are entrepreneurs and business owners, and hopefully give them knowledge and guidance and resources to build value in their lives and their businesses and make informed decisions about exiting and transitioning to their next life, whatever that may be. My guest today is Paul Deshon. He's a successful entrepreneur and business owner who recently went through our process and sold the majority stake in his environmental business to a private equity firm. He is still the president of that company and managing it on a day-to-day basis. For this episode, I thought it would be interesting to discuss his experience selling the business through our Next Life program and with our partner investment bank, Kings Point Capital, who represented him. And I thought that maybe a bit about the private equity world might be interesting to the audience. So welcome, Paul. I'm glad you're here.
Sounds funny to hear that. Successful entrepreneur.
Well, that's you.
For me.
That's you.
That
That's
just
me.
sounds
That's
funny
all
to
of
hear.
us. If we did it, we're successful.
Yep.
Well, good. I'm glad you're here. I guess I ought to preface it a little bit because we do have a prior relationship. We were worked together a long time when I owned my company.
That's correct.
We did
That's
a
actually
lot.
how we met.
Is this how we met?
You were one of my customers.
Walked in the door that day, I think.
Yep.
So, well, why don't we just start? I like to start how people find their way to being an entrepreneur. It's always a pretty interesting story. It's never the same.
No, I don't think it's a typical roadmap
Not
for
at
anybody.
all. Not at all.
It was more of a thing of survival, actually. Came from a real small town in Rhode Island and just worked as a machinist. That was my background. Found my way here to Texas in 1988. I actually moved to, my goal at the time was to come down here and buy and sell real estate, because in the 80s in Texas, real estate was real cheap. And what's crazy is I came down here. I didn't have a place to stay. I didn't have a job. I just did it. And I'll never forget the day that my friend went home. Was the very next day that we landed. And I stood in my apartment looking around going, what am I doing? And then from there, I ended up getting a machinist job on third shift. I left that. And really, I guess my first stint at being an entrepreneur was my brother Michael and I started a remodeling company, painting, roofing.
I forgot about that. You told me that, so I forgot about that. Yeah.
Very, very hard work. Wasn't making any money.
And what made you drive that? Was easy to get into, probably.
Say it again.
It was probably easy to get into. That make you pick that to begin with.
Yes.
Get a hammer, get a screwdriver. I'm in business.
And we could paint. We knew how to do all that stuff. My dad was very handy like that and taught us that. So at that point, that's what I did for about 7 years and wasn't making any money. And after that, decided to go into some sales positions. Found myself at a small, very, very small environmental company. And after about a 6-month stint, the owner started messing with mine and another salespeople. Commissions.
Okay.
Wasn't paying us. And at that point I realized I either got to leave, go work for another company again. And I decided, let me try it. And with very, very minimal knowledge of my industry, jumped into it. What I do is to supplement some income. I worked 3 days a week for a check cashing business.
Nice.
Driving around in an armored van that was loaded with cash, cashing people's checks. And the other 2 days going around and talking to customers. And then that's how the beginning happened.
It's funny how many stories are that way. I kept another job too when I started. That's that inching into it that I think we all have to do. Plus, when you start self-financing your own deal, it's a lot harder. There's nobody just giving you a bunch of money saying, go do this,
Right. And I know you have a really interesting story about how you got into it as well. But it's when I look back now, the journey of it all after 27 years. It's just amazing all the steps that it took to get where I am now and
Mhm.
the ups and downs, the hardships,
Oh, no
the,
one has any idea.
the lawsuits.
Yeah.
If you're in business, you have lawsuits.
Yeah. What do they say? You're not shit until you're sued.
Right,
That's where
right.
that was a term. I don't like that term, but that's
Say it
what they
again. You're
say.
not what?
You're not shit until you're sued.
Oh my God. Yeah, I
Yeah,
haven't
that
heard that
means you're
one.
important. I
Interesting.
don't like that. I didn't like that part of it, but
Yeah.
maybe there's some truth to that. I don't know.
Yeah, true. But it hardens you. It makes you realize what you can do and what you can put up with. And
Well, that's why I love entrepreneurship from the black and white of it all.
yeah.
It's always a natural progression for a salesperson too. I always said a good salesperson is either going to probably stay doing that and getting used to a high income and being okay with it, or they're going to go into business.
Correct.
I mean, it's just almost a guaranteed.
Right.
Because the natural progression is you sit there and go, well, I'm selling. Why don't I sell for me?
Yeah.
Now, and in my case too, I started young, didn't know anything, thought I knew everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's usually a cocky trait but I think you need a little bit of cockiness too to make it all work. Because it comes out somebody's kicking your ass all the time. So
Yeah.
you need to be able to do that too,
Yeah.
So.
You've got to have some ferve to you to get
So
out
you
there.
so you just open the shingle, you open the door, and did it go well straight away or no?
No, it took, I'll never forget the first customer that we did a job for. He wasn't paying right away. And it was about 90 days in and I needed to pay the vendors.
Okay.
And I went to him and I think he seen desperation in my eye. Like, I need a check. And he finally gave me the check. He said, don't worry, Paul, you'll get paid. And he paid us. And that was just really probably the first,
You're like,
oh my God.
this works.
Yes, yes. And then after that, it was just, as any entrepreneur will say, there's a lot of ups and downs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the ups are what keep you going.
Sure.
And it's those wins at the end of the day when you shut off the light and close the door and you look back and think, wow, a lot of hours today, but it was so worth it. And you're working for yourself.
Well, that's where I was going to. I think freedom and
Yeah.
independence is such a big piece to that.
Yeah.
And you don't not have bosses. That's not true. You have a bunch of bosses. You have a bunch of customers and
Customers are the boss.
And you don't only work when you want to. That's the big other
Right.
fallacy out there.
Right.
Like you don't work. But I mean, I guess you could take that, but then it's a hobby and not a business. To be
Yes.
successful. Everyone I know that's done it has worked very,
Yeah.
very hard.
And I think you tend to love it a little bit more too when you're working for yourself and it's your own sort of
Oh,
say
100%.
baby. You might not enjoy every day and every facet of it, but you're willing to do it because it is for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that part's really rewarding.
Or like even being a cog in a wheel, I figured out I was not good at. And, like I always told people when I hired them away, we don't have stupid meetings. I can assure you we're not going to have stupid meetings. Tried to always keep that no matter how big we got,
Yeah.
Well, why don't you, just before we get into the other, what exactly did Excel do at the beginning and then now? Is it pretty much the same kind of description?
We added services over the years, and it first started out really just as a waste management company. We'd come in and any type of industrial waste that you had.
Would broker be a good term for that?
Yeah.
Because sometimes that's not a good term. Like an investment banking broker means
Yeah.
subpar.
Well, kind of in our industry as well.
Subpar is broker means subpar to investment banking work.
In our industry a little bit as well, but it is the correct term. It's what we do. We come in, we help companies that generate waste, find places to take it, facilitate everything for them. It's a nice turnkey for them because they don't have to worry about it. And there's so many rules and regulations in environmental that companies would have to constantly be staying up on it. And for them to be able to call one company and say, hey, come
Handle
get this. You handle it and it be done. And they can take it off their plate and check it off their list. I think it's rewarding to them. So in the very beginning, we just did transportation disposal of waste, and then it morphed more into environmental cleanups
Which is
as well.
They call you the waste. You go contract your vendors, your locations, things that
Correct.
the right facility to take this and do this, and that's kind of how it works.
Yeah, we'd come out, grab a sample of the waste, analyze it, do all the documentation, all the paperwork necessary to get it accepted at the facility, set up the proper transporter, set up the proper documents that go with it, and they could sleep at night because they knew that we were keeping them compliant.
Right.
And that's the important part of our business and why companies really started to rely on us and how we succeeded was they could rely on us to make sure that they were compliant.
Mhm.
They didn't have to worry about getting audited and getting fined.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
yeah. But the other services we started adding was environmental cleanups. If somebody flipped over a truck on the side of the road, if somebody drove a forklift through a tank at a facility, we'd come in and do
Y'all,
emergency
they're
responses.
the first call, emergency response.
Yes.
Call XL. Then okay, got it.
Yes. And then cleaning of industrial process areas in facilities. If they're manufacturing pipe or have plating shops and they need the areas clean because they're contaminated, we come in and started doing that. Then we started providing environmental supplies. And then on top of that, we started doing repurposing of chemicals, where we'd buy a chemical that was slightly used or off spec and find a secondary market for it. And that's a really interesting side of the business because everybody wins. The company that normally has to dispose
Well, that was
of
what
it.
I always told you. You remember? I would always say,
Yes.
there's got to be something in our waste valuable there, Paul.
But what you had, it wasn't.
And you would always go, there's nothing there but pipe, dope, and wax and dirt.
Right.
You know?
Sorry, Gary. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know something for that.
And then
one.
I'd be like, well, let's go find them together. I'm telling you, no, there's nothing there. Do remember that conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
But that is the so it's been a really exciting journey and watching the company grow and the amount of customers that come on and how they rely on you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and do you think, just an environmental just service question for me, do you think has that awareness gotten any better, or was it the same when you started as it is now?
Awareness
of I need an environmental company to do this. I mean, I knew it being the industry we were in. It was like, I mean, and then learning, how bad it is if you don't do something.
Yes.
There's
still some bad actors out there.
There's still
some bad actors out there. But
it's kind of unbelievable to me since it's criminal
Yes.
and it's forever and it's, I mean, it's a lot of bad stuff.
Yep. There's still companies out there or people that are willing to take the chance to save a little bit of money, to do the wrong thing, pump it down the drain, hide it somewhere, bury the drum. But when they're found, they will go to jail, especially if it's intentional.
Yeah.
And the amount of fines, it just in the end is not worth it.
And that's the difference too. You couldn't go to jail.
Yeah.
That's what people don't realize. You can go to jail.
Happen.
I've
seen it happen. So the awareness part, I would say that companies and people are definitely more aware of it now.
Yeah.
And I think just through, media, news, hearing the stories, I think it's made them more aware that they have to be compliant. Yeah.
So you built it, you started it, it's plugged along in 20 years. How long
27.
was it? 27? So it was on the 26th year you sold, I guess?
Yes.
Okay.
26th year.
Wow. That's the same kind of as me. And it goes fast, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Because I mean, when I looked back and saw that it was 20 something years, I'm like, no, it hadn't been 20 years, has it? Oh my gosh, it had been.
Yeah. And it's amazing thinking doing the same thing for that long. But again, you enjoyed it. And it was for yourself. So you just every day got up and did it.
Right.
And then watching it grow, is also something very rewarding. And looking back, as you start to look at even the numbers and the revenue growth,
right.
And you look back and think, my God, the first year I did 90,000.
Yeah.
It took me about 3 years to get to $1 million. And then at this point we ended, you look back and think, wow, what a great, I call it an animal that you started, because companies now start to really call on you for everything and want more and more.
And it's such a difference, and you grew dramatically as well. And, I found a dog-eared, this was several years ago now, a dog-eared little 3x5 index card of some of the goals I had for the company in 1990.
No kidding.
And I'm looking at them and they're so laughable.
Yeah.
But then they wasn't laughable.
No.
They were just like, holy cow, if I could do 3 of these 10, then we're going to, be on cloud 9.
Right, right.
So, and I think that's the builder, because I think that builder aspect of it all is always there for any entrepreneur. I think that's one of the reasons it's hard to think about the selling too, because I think by nature, I know I'm sure you was the kid that you built the Lego thing high and you knock it down and then you build it back up again, because for us, it's just building another.
I could do it again.
Yeah, exactly. You didn't think about all the pieces and you just start building it again, and I think that mentality is what makes us successful.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you rock along and then getting into the sale discussion. So, I mean, I know we talked, I mean, when I sold, we had a bit of a conversation and then,
Hmm.
but then really you were still, I think, enthralled. And it was sometime later before that started sort of creeping in.
Hmm.
So let's talk about that a little bit. I mean,
Okay.
what made you started thinking about it? Did something, you know, creep into your mind about it, or did it just all of a sudden you? Because I know we had a little different path with we started and then COVID and all that, but
Hmm.
prior to that is where I wanted to start with is did that just sort of rock in the back of your mind? Hey, I want to sell one day, or did it not come at all?
Initially it was never there. And I think the only times it'd spark up a little bit of thought would be when companies are just calling you blindly and
Yeah,
asking you, "Do you want to sell your business?"
yeah.
And that's when you start getting a little like, wow, somebody wants to buy my business. What would this even be worth?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, it's a brokering business.
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time, I always thought I had a business that wouldn't sell.
Did you? Okay,
I,
that
I
just was
really
in your
did.
mind because you were like, I'm just a broker. No one's going to buy me.
Yeah. And I believe a lot of entrepreneurs probably have that thought
Oh, I totally agree.
of a small
See it
business.
all the time.
Yeah.
We've had people, Paul, that say, or I've had discussions even recently. What are you going to do? What's your exit plan?
Hmm.
I'll probably just close it whenever. We're like, what? There's value, and I don't know that there's really going to be any value. Blah blah
Yes.
blah. But there is.
Yes. I know an environmental consulting company that just closed the doors. There was four.
And they were doing well and had
They've been
businesses.
around for 30 something years.
Oh my
And,
gosh.
and they had great big clients. And I couldn't believe it, but all four of them just wanted to be done. And they were in their late 50s and 60s, I guess, and they just closed the door.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought to myself, why wouldn't they have sold?
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
and that was some years prior to me ever even thinking about selling, but I was shocked that they did that. But going back to that same statement, I believe a lot of entrepreneurs think, my little business, who's going to want to buy this? And
Mm-hmm.
but there's a value out there. There's people out there that want it,
Right.
especially if it's generating some type of income.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what it was amazing to me to sort of, and working on both sides from building and now on the M&A side, it's like there's always a buyer.
Yes.
That was always a little surprising to me getting into that world. Now, at what price is a
Right.
completely different conversation, but there's always a buyer that you don't necessarily think, that there would be.
Mhm.
So back to that broker, just because I want to head on it a second, because it's such
Mhm.
a common, we all, when we had our business, have been called with someone saying, we want to buy your business. And it's usually a crappy broker tactic, usually.
Mhm.
Usually there's not really anyone,
Tire-
many times there's not,
Tire kickers.
or they're a broker trying to get a listing, which
Yes.
is the difference in a person that is, so, but I did the same thing. When people called, I would say, I mean, what rolled around in my mind all the time was and I would say, what's your name? And I would keep the name, but I wouldn't do anything with it. Makes no sense.
Just set that card
I
aside.
just set that card
Yeah.
aside, but and in my mind, I would think to myself, well, maybe one day I could do this. And then the windshield would come rushing back and, you're back and now I would look for me, it was so, knowing what I know now about valuations and how it works, I would wait for the Inc. magazine to come out every year. And I would look, they had a valuation section in the back,
Really.
or once a year they would do it.
I
It would
wasn't
just
reading.
say like, broad classes of industry.
Okay.
Based on your sales and your earnings, you're probably worth this. Which, knowing what I know now, it was just pitiful
Mhm.
how inaccurate it was. But man, I would look at that every year. I'd wait for that issue and go, oh, it's probably worth that.
Mm.
And then I wouldn't really do anything. It just sort of sat there.
Mhm.
And so I think it's always some external, which it sounds like it was for you too, that kind of hits you over the head one way or the other, life change or,
Yeah.
competitor sales, something like that.
Yeah, and
I can't remember when you first called us, you told me back in 2020 why you were thinking about it. I mean,
Oh.
what hit your radar there?
At that point, I think I started getting a little burnt out.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe wanting chapter two and thinking, okay, I need to have some type of exit plan here, and thinking about how you had done it as well.
Yeah, because
And we had multiple conversations about that.
we did have a lot of conversations.
Yes.
And
So,
you were going, you used to go, man, you don't look very stressed.
right.
You
And
know
I
what
remember
I'm
how
saying?
stressed I always was at
Yeah.
that point. And so for me at that point, I was like, all right, let's start looking at this and figuring it out. And I didn't, I think maybe initially when we first started talking about it, I didn't think it was going to jump right into it. And then once we started going down that road
Right.
and talking with my wife about it, who helped me build the business as
And then
well.
she was, if I remember, even more on board than you were initially, right?
Yes. And I
Yeah.
think she was more worried about me, wanting me to
Funny
be
how that
around.
works. Funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let
Yeah.
me go
Yeah.
back too and
Oh, I
say,
understand that too. Yeah.
let me go back and say also, it takes a supporting family, a supporting wife
Oh,
in order to do and be an entrepreneur, for them to understand it, the amount of hours it takes, but them also in the office after hours, my wife would be there for me after coming home from her job and staying up till 1 a.m., 2 a.m.,
mhm,
doing all the back office work
mhm,
that I couldn't get to during the day because I was out selling.
mhm.
So I really believe it takes a real supporting family and understanding in order to grow that business.
Yeah. I've had young entrepreneurs come to me and they go, and I'll say, what do your wife think or husband? And most of the time it's the wife, and it's like, oh, well, I don't know. I'm going to go do this. I'm like, no, no, no.
Yeah.
You're going to have it all because, too, I mean, it's an incredible risk and it's a
Mhm.
hard journey. It's not an easy journey. And
Right.
it's something, and there's a lot of wives and husbands not cut out for it. I'll tell you that
Yeah.
right now. I've seen it. For
Yeah.
me, I was so fortunate too to have a wife that was all in and all in on the risk piece, which is huge.
Yes.
But then also believing in you or believing in me was so important
Hmm.
because you're getting your butt kicked out there
Yep.
on a daily basis. And if you come home and then the same thing happens, well, why don't you get a real job and come on? I mean, I just shudder to think if you had that,
Yeah.
it's not gonna work.
And thank God I didn't, because you're right. If I had to think back and think that when I came back every day after really putting your heart into it, and you have a spouse or a family member
Yeah,
that's just beating you down about it, yeah, that'd have been more difficult for
yeah, it
sure.
wouldn't work.
No.
I don't think it.
Yeah.
Or if it does work, it's not going to be near as successful.
Yeah.
Near as successful. And sometimes I think it's too bad because they don't get the credit they deserve for
The spouse?
yeah,
Yes.
they just think there's
Yeah.
a spouse.
I absolutely give mine credit because she was in there with me.
Mhm.
And then after 3 years, which again, a lot of couples can't do, after 3 years, she finally quit her job and came on full time with me,
Mhm.
working side by side every single day, 10 feet apart. And some spouses can't even be together for a couple hours
Well,
without.
it's funny because Tiffany did she's an accountant by trade and had the bookkeeping practice. And we loved the fact she organized and set it. Now, day to day, we would butt heads, but it would be so crazy because we're trying to go the same place.
Yes.
We would just but at the same time, I didn't want anyone else doing the financials or no one else,
Right.
So it's just funny how that
It's that
works.
trust factor.
Yeah, it's got
Yeah.
to be a lot of that,
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Too many people losing money due to
uh,
accountants or whatever.
absolutely.
And I didn't have to worry about that either.
Well, so I know, so that started rolling around in your head in 2020. So I want to
Mhm.
talk about that a little bit, how
Okay.
that was pre-COVID. And I
Mhm.
remember we got it going and we had some offers and then COVID hit.
Yes.
And if correct me if I don't remember this properly, but we had an offer from someone and we were going to wait on them. And then COVID happened and their business changed,
Yes.
as did the world.
Hmm.
And then everything got put on hold.
So through your help, I met Kings Point, Steven
Right.
Silverman,
Right.
and you being a business coach for me as well,
Right.
which helped me mentally, because I think also an entrepreneur gets so wrapped up in their business and they start thinking, why would I sell it? It's generating income for me.
Mhm. Mhm.
But when you go to the market and you realize what the value of that business is, and you helping me with some spreadsheets showing how many years you're going to have to work
Yeah,
to
that
get
always
that
is an eye
cash.
opener.
Yes, it was. It was a really good eye opener. At that point, you start to realize, okay, if I sell now, because it's at a really good high, and the business is doing great, I can grab that cash and go on in life and maybe do something else.
Mhm.
But pre-COVID, so yes, after meeting Kings Point and Steven Silverman, and we started to go to the market. The nice thing about an M&A broker, and a lot of entrepreneurs think, oh, I'm going to do this myself.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, there's a lot more to it than you could ever imagine.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, we got to the table. He brought, I forget how many people signed NDAs, maybe 20, 30 companies. And then he started narrowing it down. and actually
I
pre-COVID
think there was
rate.
pre-COVID, there was 6 or 7, wasn't there?
There were
Yeah.
7 companies
Yeah,
that
that's what I
started
remember.
creating quotes or bids, offers, and we got it down to 3. And that's
Mm.
when COVID hit. And everybody started pulling back. And at the time, I was bummed about it.
Oh, I remember once we got through it and it started, we got through COVID, you called me back and you said, what do we do now? And I said, just go keep building your business because we
Yes,
can't
you
do
did.
nothing for
That's
a year.
exactly right.
I said,
Go sell.
we gotta go make it good again,
Yeah.
you know, and see you back in a year, you
Yep.
know.
And you did. You said, go sell. Go sell and
Well,
keep
and the
building.
good thing was too, I remember it actually worked out better
A lot better.
because it, even that original offer, which, you know, you woulda, shoulda, coulda is a big word,
Mhm.
but you know, the company was going to go public and then they didn't. And then,
Yes.
you know, but the number was lower, was significantly lower.
We almost doubled it waiting 3
Yeah.
years.
I think it was, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. It was 60 or 50% less. I remember
Yeah.
it ultimately. So that actually
Worked
out, which sort of speaks to the next topic of timing. I mean, I see it over and over. It's hard for me to express it, certainly in my own experience, but also working with the
Excuse me.
clients now, is the timing is so critical
Yes.
on so many levels, you know, because you as an owner, I mean, that's like pushing an owner. You know, what I see done wrong in the M&A industry is people get pushed into things that they're not quite ready for. And
Mhm.
to me, if those boxes aren't checked, like if you wanted to see your name on the door and you just couldn't, you know, then what are we doing? What's
Yeah.
the point of it all?
Yeah.
You know, but timing is such a, I mean, right before COVID, you know, or when COVID
Mhm.
happened, it looked dreadful for everyone.
Right.
And that's the thing. I think it's hard for entrepreneurs on the timing because we get told by estate attorneys and life insurance salesmen and that you should be doing this, you should be doing that. We're not generally very good at listening.
No.
At listening to, unless it's a
We're
peer,
listening to our own ideas.
our own ideals,
Yeah.
but we're not going to listen, you
Yeah.
know? And so I think that is a big, big driver in it all,
Mhm.
you know?
So going into the COVID though, when everybody pulled back, you talk about that risk factor because all companies were starting to shut down, right? No more people in the office, almost manufacturing was shutting down. And for us, we're a waste company. So when manufacturing happened, we're getting
Yeah,
our
there was
business.
no waste. Yeah.
Right. So not only did we lose on the sale all of a sudden, but I'm wondering as an entrepreneur, is the business going to be there in 2 weeks or a
Yeah.
year from now?
Yeah.
Did we just miss our opportunity?
Mhm.
But we kept at it and kept at it. And when COVID came back, revenues almost doubled or tripled. And actually they doubled, a little bit over doubled,
Mhm.
probably 65% more
Mhm.
on revenues. And that presented a better opportunity at this time.
Well, and I noticed, you know, when you get close like that, and certainly even after, it is an eye opener. It's an
Mhm.
eye opener for an owner. You're like, because we got that from a lot of COVID. It's like people you don't think something bad could happen. Just
Right.
we're generally optimists. You have to be
Yeah.
a good entrepreneur. Go away.
You worry.
You worry,
You worry.
but you're optimistic, and
Yeah.
then you're like, "Whoa, what if something happens I can't control?
Yeah.
Holy cow! This
Right.
COVID I definitely didn't control or couldn't control." You know,
Right.
so it starts,
No control on that.
yeah, it starts making an impression. You know,
Yeah.
so let's just talk about the overall process of selling. I mean,
Okay.
you made one comment about it. I mean, just
We're going to need a lot of hours.
I
for
know.
this.
Well, this is going to be the meat of what we're talking about today. But you know, I mean, I assume it's more complex than you thought. That's usually you made that statement, and that's almost 100% feedback of that. You know,
Yes.
I think owners think there's somebody's going to slide an envelope across the desk, and we're going to be done in an afternoon.
Yep.
You know,
Okay, you can walk away. Here's your money.
Yeah.
No, not that simple. There's so many items to negotiate, talk about, think about, and especially how complex your business might be.
Mhm.
Ours
Explain.
wasn't extremely complex, but there was still so many items, things you wouldn't think about
Mhm.
when you're selling your business compared to selling a home or even a car.
Yeah.
It was just ungodly. And thank God again for, I can be a little strong-headed and think, I can get this done. I can get this done. I don't need a broker, M&A broker to help me. But I am really glad that I did because there was items and points that were negotiated that I would have never even thought about, and presented
That's
me a better option at the end of it,
sure.
right? Even on employment, everything going forward. So yeah, so the process, what exactly was that?
Yeah, I remember that too. I remember at one point being, I didn't mind raising my hand, nor did you, which I love because that's the best way to do it is
Mhm.
get the information, understand it. But I remember at one point, you know how it goes so fast at one point, and then you're just sort of like, and I was sitting at a table and I'm like, I don't even know what the hell all this means. I was
Yeah,
keeping up pretty well. Now I don't.
yeah.
And I sure hope these people do because I'm
Dude,
trusting them to do that. And I think
yep.
that's one of the
Yep.
hardest pieces to it because at the end of the day, you do realize in your mind you're selling and you're no longer going to have this vehicle
Right.
that's been your vehicle to do feed your family and make
Mhm.
that
Go
for
on
me that was a
trips.
hard well I'm giving this away well no
Yeah,
you're not giving it away you're just trading it
right.
but that concept takes a little while to
Yeah.
to
And it is that you go through, so the beginning of the process, you got to make sure you're on board, your spouse is on board, and you have to commit to it
mhm,
once you start it. And you don't want to be wishy-washy.
mhm.
And so once you do, you go through so many emotions
Yeah,
of am I doing the right thing? Should we sell? What's the value going to be? And you don't know that value truly until you get onto the market.
right yeah
Because it could be all over the place, depending on what type of buyer you're getting, a strategic buyer or, private equity or venture capitalists. You just don't know
mhm,
what they're going to offer. And so you're right. It's your vehicle to survive and live,
mhm.
and it's your baby. And going through that process, like you say, about trusting your broker and the people that are working for you to get it sold. Entrepreneurs are more controlling and want to
Oh, we're
control
control
that. Yes.
freaks.
And want to
We're
control everything that's
control
happening.
freaks. We've always has been and usually been pretty good at it if you got a
Yeah.
successful business.
Right.
you know?
Right. So you have to trust these people, and you're right. You get to the table, and there's so many points being talked about, and the legal language
Ah,
in some of the documents, and it's so confusing that I literally, and if you remember during the process, I'm asking them, "Is this good? Like, is this what we want?" Because it's
yeah,
so confusing.
yeah, yeah.
But it all worked out in the end, and but yeah, there's a lot of topics that we could
So if
sit
you
here
think
and talk
about what
about.
surprised you, I know you just said
Mhm.
length of time. Was there other thing that not that you spent a ton of time thinking about it over the years, but there was some other anything else jumped out at you that said, "Wow, man, that was different than I thought," or more hard or longer than I thought, or anything like that.
It was what really struck my wife and I was it's like an audit in some ways, right? And
Hmm.
the amount of lists you actually
And
go,
you're like, why?
yes, listen, here's the books. We're making that kind of money. You don't need to know anything else, but it isn't that, so a company's buying you and they need to know everything. And I understand that. But I think it was the length of time. It was the amount of lists that they required on everything and what the company owns. Who are all the customers? What MSAs are there? What
Hmm.
contracts are there? What are all the MSAs with your vendors? If you get bought out, are the vendors going to continue to service you?
Hmm.
And so it's all those points that you actually get to times during the sale where you reach deal fatigue. I
Oh,
think,
almost all the time you see it.
yeah, I think I probably hit it maybe
You
seven
did.
times.
Yeah. And at the end, you really hit it. And then,
Yeah.
and there's always usually
Yes.
this moment of panic.
Yeah.
There was for me. I saw it with you. I
Yes.
see it with most. You really start even pulling back, going, maybe do I even want to do this at all?
That's exactly right.
you know,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe but I think that's a function, and that's what I work real hard to try to do is coach that initially that hey, here's the emotions you're
Mhm.
gonna have, but at the same time, it's almost impossible I've found to convey the complexity and the until you've been through it. It's sort of like being an
Yeah.
entrepreneur. It's like if you tried to tell somebody what it's like to run and own a business. I mean, it's like I think Buffett says, it's like teaching a fish to walk and trying to explain it, for 2 days until he tries to walk or something like that.
I've never heard that.
Yeah. But I mean,
Interesting.
you can't,
No.
because I had the same experience going through. I'm like, holy cow, man, which, is part of what, I tell folks. I'm like, listen, do what you want. If it's time, it's time. If it's not, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
But don't do this yourself.
Right, right.
I mean, but I always say, it's your biggest asset, are you really cool with doing that? I mean, you're fine in other aspects of your business to go get an expert, a logger.
And the company that's buying you generally, if
they're very good. Yeah.
They're very good at it. And so they could easily take advantage of things that you would not think are being taken advantage of. And so in the end, you want to make sure that every point that you have to negotiate and work through is for the best of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're right. At the end of it, you don't want to look back and regret it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to absolutely confirm that this is what you want to do, know what the approximate value you're going to get. Will that work for, your family,
Mm-hmm.
the value
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get out of it? And then if so, and you confirm and that you're going to do this, commit. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
When you commit to it.
Well, those numbers are so critical, like you said,
Yes.
because I mean, we usually get fairly close through the process of a range, but at the end of the day, you don't know.
You don't.
And the only true value in the world always is what someone pays and someone accepts for something. Now you have to get much closer to that. And that's what I felt like, our program does better. And what I tried to do is narrow that gap, because it's a huge life decision to sit there and go, well, I think I'm going to say, well, you could sell between this range. And if it's this big, then, that's not enough information for you, so you have to try to narrow it down, and starting with, hey, what is enough for me? I mean, that's always my question to the owners is what is enough for you? And it usually becomes chicken and egg. It becomes, oh, well, I guess that depends on what it's selling. No, that's not what I ask you first. We're going to get to that.
Right.
But right now, I want to know. Yeah. And as an owner, it's hard to think about your money, making money and all of those things,
You don't think about it. And actually,
no, you don't.
That was the value that you brought to the table for me, is that you not only sat down and you explained to me, listen, you're not just getting this one paycheck. Make this money work for you later on. And here's what it's going to generate every single year thereafter. And then the idea of, okay, I'm selling, this is my lifeline, but how many years do you got to work to get that cash out?
I remember, was it the first one? I think I told you, and I sit there and we did the projections of what you thought you were going to sell. And maybe this was on the first sale. I don't remember. And I said, Paul, you're going to have to work 9.8 years to get that.
That was the first one.
And you were like, I don't want to work 9 years.
Right,
I said, Paul, these are your numbers.
Yeah.
Said, give me another number, dude, and I'll change it,
Yeah.
So,
and then the second one came out to about 14, I believe it was.
Something like that. Yeah.
Years to accomplish and get that.
And then when you
cash.
do it like that, and I did the same thing at my kitchen table, which was such a motivator for me, which is why I use it so readily. But I sat there and said, I don't want to do this. I can honestly answer to myself. Mine was 11.1 or something like that. I'm like, all these things still had to happen, earnouts and things like that, but they did happen. But I was honest. I could honestly say, man, I know I don't want to do that.
You were done?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't want, and I wasn't done, but I was like, I could do 2 more years with a private equity, which is what I did. But I didn't want to do 11 more. I said, what if I tried to make the same amount of money?
I see.
If I found the capital I needed, which I didn't know where that was going to come from, but assume I did. And then how many years? And I'm like, man, that doesn't sound appealing. I mean, so, those kind of things I think, and also like, I wanted to bring out too, that people back to the process. I mean, sometimes they think you can't sell and they just put it out for like a lawsuit. Like you had a lawsuit.
Oh yeah.
And that comment was made early and we talked about it, that you can still sell it. They could escrow it out. And we run into a lot of companies. We were talking to one recently about this, that just completely put that out of their, even though they've had offers and they go, oh my God, this has got to play out for 4 years. And they just, the guy we met with just the other day, he goes, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was even possible.
He had a lawsuit or something going on?
That you can frame it and still sell the company and escrow that amount of the lawsuit, things like that. I think
that was a big worry of mine.
Well, and that's where I think good representation can explain those sort of things.
It really didn't become an issue.
Yeah,
There's money put into an escrow and We ended up solving it as soon as right after the sale. It was the week after.
Right,
And it
right.
became a non-issue right away, actually, for us. But going back to the the 9 to 14 years and also what you were saying, 11 years to get that cash. The other part that you have to think about and that you helped me with also through discussions was that's painting a rosy picture that every single
Mhm.
year you're going to be able to make that cash. But what about if you lose big clients? What
Yeah.
if you get into a lawsuit? What if the economy goes down? So it's all these other risk factors too that you have to take into consideration over those 9 to 14 years. That will that cash really be there?
Mhm.
What if a negative happens? And again, we're very positive thinking people. We like to believe,
Yeah, yeah.
but we also worry, and we have to be real, and we think about those
But
things
you
as
know, I
well.
think that's such a blind spot. I know it absolutely was for me,
Mm,
Paul. It's just a blind spot I think we've conditioned ourselves to. And I think the reason why is because early, a lot of us were similar. Your story, mine was, we didn't have nothing. So we
Right.
wasn't risking nothing.
True.
So when you start and you're young and you're not risking nothing,
Yeah.
but what ends up happening is you plug away for 20 years.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we're older,
Right.
for one.
Speak for yourself.
And then we're wiser though. We're wiser. We're older and wiser.
There you go. Yeah.
But we also say then the equation changes a little bit, but we haven't changed.
Right.
We're still going to the salt mine every day with a pick.
Salt mine. I like
And we're just like, we don't know. And then I think it took someone to shake me and say, hey, you can do that. You can go to the salt mine. You can find a way. You can die at that desk right there. That's cool. That's where you want to be. No pressure. But you will die.
Mm-hmm.
100% chance of that.
That's it.
You know, and you don't have to. There is another path.
Yeah.
Let me just show you the path. Don't got to do it. And
Yeah.
that's where, you know, that's my whole mission. Even this podcast, everything's like, let me show you something. You don't have to do it. If you don't want to do it, I'm not going to tell you to do it.
Mm.
But that's hard, I think, for entrepreneurs to get that message in our heads because the risk, we're blinded to it because we had to be blinded to it. I mean, how many people told you you're crazy at the beginning or at different, maybe not exactly those, I actually got exactly those words, but something similar to that. And he's like, I know what I'm doing, you know?
Yeah. You know, in the beginning, you're right. There's people that are like, man, you got this background on machinist. Why wouldn't you go just be
Why'd you
steady
leave a
with
good
that?
job at the machine shop?
Yes. And that just wasn't me. And I learned that early on. I knew it. I couldn't stand at that machine shop, or that machine rather, all day long and just cut. There was more for me. And so what makes an entrepreneur, I think you got to be hungry. You got to want it, you know, and you want to maybe want more. I don't know, you know, if that's
I did.
for
I had a
everybody.
similar story. Had a good sales job and it was not in the industry I ended up being in. But there was a guy I worked with that was he was a phenomenal guy, but he's my age now. And I'm back then 25 or 24 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember looking at him going, and here he was. And I was like, I don't want to be this dude. I don't want to be this guy at 59.
Mm.
Now, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to be,
Yeah.
except that I
Same
didn't
here.
want to be that.
Right.
And so it wasn't. Now, I was not naive to think that I couldn't have failed.
Mm-hmm.
But I even said to myself, if I fail, I don't want to be this guy. And he wasn't a bad guy.
Yeah.
But I'm just like, hey, he's pitching this stuff. He's eating sandwiches and staving. You know, I'm like, saving every and it was ironic that guy. This was the guy that took his lunch and would, you know, save every penny and drive this truck and preach to us about all these things. And he had this retirement date and this 401k, this certain date he had circled, blah, blah, blah. And I remember he died, I don't know how many years ago now. And my friend who worked at the same company and had stayed there called me and goes, hey, Jim died. And I said, man, and he goes, I know what you're going to ask. 1 week before.
You're kidding.
So then and I'm thinking, what was all that worth?
Yeah.
You know, so there's some of that too.
Yes.
But I do think you got to enjoy the process though.
You gotta enjoy the process. You gotta be willing to wake up at 3:30 in the morning and think about things that you're worried about. So that's a big part of it as well. And every day going in and, you know, dealing with, there's a lot of headaches to be an entrepreneur.
Oh yeah.
It's not easy. It's not easy, but you know, it's not made for everybody. You know, having a real good job and a steady job is okay as well. But the fact of, if you have it in you and you want to try it, go try it and don't regret it.
Yes. I think
Don't
same
regret.
thing.
Go try it.
Yeah. Yeah. My daughter's entering that entrepreneurial world, and that's what I told her. And, she's like, yeah, I got to get over some people telling me. And I said, babe, they don't make, statues for critics.
I
You
like
never
that.
see no statue of
Yeah.
a critic, so.
Interesting.
So you had these parties that it was interested, and then
Mhm.
we went through this process of an auction type format, and you had multiple parties. I can't remember, did the company you thought would buy it, was that the buyer? I can't remember if.
Actually, during the process, towards the end, there was another party that jumped in, and they were more of a strategic buyer.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought going to the table that they would be the one,
Mm-hmm.
not realizing that in the end, it'd be a gentleman backed by venture capitalists,
Mm-hmm.
private equity, I'm sorry,
Mm-hmm.
that we would eventually sell to. So I really didn't have it nailed down, but I really thought it was going to be a different party until we met with them and realized they were just trying to lowball. And at that point,
Mm-hmm.
realized they're not the company for me.
Yeah, I know a lot of times it ends up being different. That to
Yeah.
me is some of the benefit of doing it at, I say an auction. It's not quite like an auction, but
Yes.
it really is. It's
Yeah.
multiple parties to the table, and then
Yeah.
that provides all kind of negotiating power and things like that.
And let me say also, that I think that's a really good value that the broker brings to the table too, about driving that price up. That
Mhm.
M&A broker.
Oh,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and a lot of people selling a business or even selling a car or whatever it is, if there's a fee attached to that, you may look at that fee and go, "Oh, I'll get this. I'm not going to spend that kind of money." But to me, it was invaluable. The amount of work that was put forth
Well,
helped.
and we say if someone is not going through the process and the fee, there's not enough aside from the advice and all that, but if there's not real dollars attached to the fee, meaning the fee gets paid by the price going up,
Yes,
then the job's not been done very well.
right.
But that's even before you get into this. I always say
That's
this
a
is the
good
most
point.
important asset of your life.
Yes,
So it's like I want all the best.
yes.
And it's funny because we see the other thing we see a lot of, and it didn't necessarily happen in your case, but we'll see people come in and try to buy people, put their arm around them, and essentially say, I love you, I love you. And, we're going to do great things. And you don't need a broker, you don't need that. And
Yeah.
then the moment get involved or something, it's like, ah, ah. They
Mm-hmm.
hate it. And the reason they hate it, because they know they're going to pay more almost
Yes. So,
immediately.
so you may not be paying a fee to the broker, but you're paying a fee in the
You're
long run
paying a
because
fee anyway.
you're leaving another $1 million on the table that other guy's not going to pay you. The broker can bring that up for you.
Yeah, and what was always interesting to me too was owners would say to, like, when that would happen, they'd say, "Well, I don't want to piss them off."
Yeah.
That guy, and
That's interesting.
I'm always like,
Yeah.
listen, this is the asset of your life. I
Yeah.
mean, you if they're going to get mad about that, they're not going to
Right.
really be the right buyer for you. But I guess that just speaks to there's so many opportunities and buyers out there.
Mhm.
That was something that was surprising to me. And I think it's interesting. You commented on it earlier. It's like that there are, because I think owners sit around and go, "Well, no one would buy this."
Right.
And
I thought that for the longest time.
yeah, because you said to yourself, you're a broker. Who would
Yeah.
want that, huh?
Yeah. Working out of a small office and at the time with a lot of customers, but never thinking that my business model would be something of value to somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it turned out very well.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well, so we always say there's price and then there's structure. And there's always, there's a price that's offered for something, and there's structure. There's always structure, no matter. So in, your case, you had some cash at closing, you retained a percentage in the company, and you had,
mhm.
some unearned out for performance. How do you think about each of those buckets? I had them all. I had cash at closing, some retained interest, an earn out, and I actually loaned them some of the money to buy it, which is another bucket. But
Well,
the reason I did that was to get more, money for the whole company.
okay.
That was the driver. And I think that's always usually the case if you're willing to accept structure. You get a little more,
Mhm.
than, but I mean, you seemed pretty comfortable with that overall. I mean, the earn out was a little bit of a angst for you.
Yes. And I think depending on the business and the you going forward. And again, there's always that risk. You don't know once you sell, if you have earnouts, am I going to lose some big customers over the next year? You don't know. And, there's so many different things that could affect that. But so the earnouts, they make you push, which is good because then you're driving revenue. And then when you make that earnout, it's such a great win.
Yeah. Yeah.
Such a great win.
Well, and the thing I always try to point out to owners, and again, I know you would agree, we don't push. I mean, push is not, this is a complete self-discovery is the way we approach it all.
Mm-hmm.
But I always tell owners, you have an earn out with yourself. Whether it's back to your assessment when you say, what's going to happen over these next, when you say to yourself, well, I could take this money now or earn it over these 5 years. Well, what owners don't take a step back and see is, because they'll say, well, I don't want to take an earn out. I mean, I got to hit that to make that.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that's fine. But you realize you got to hit a whole lot of that to keep the wheels on the tracks if you keep it. So you always have an earn out. You just have an earn out with yourself.
True.
Now you have 100% control over that earn out. And that's part of getting the right deal too.
Mm-hmm.
Because what we see is the earn outs can be really tricky.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where not having representation can be real bad.
Yeah.
In the earnouts, because you saw some of the language.
Yes.
I mean, it's terrible. And those guys, a lot of them buy companies for a living. So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I mean, there was some stuff that was trying to be slipped in there, and
yeah, you have to say, whoa.
You really got to watch that. Going back to all the buckets, each deal that's offered to your company, and if you have multiple offers, which you're hoping you do, because then it'll drive up the price usually.
Mm-hmm.
The offers are structured in so many different ways, like you say. Some have earnouts, some don't. Some it's more cash at closing.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on how the structure is, and it's working through each deal to see what's going to be the best for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then looking at each one and understanding, can I make that earnout?
Yeah, yeah.
Is it real? Is it true?
Mm-hmm.
And if it is real and it's achievable, is that the deal for you? So you got to kind of look at everything. And some people might want to just take cash and less for the company and walk away. But I think as entrepreneurs, we're used to wanting that goal.
Sure.
So if it's structured in a way that you can get more money, but you got to go do these things.
Yeah. I've heard the term where people, there's negative connotations and real negative to anything, but I've heard that a few times. A couple of things I've heard that says, well, I would never take an earn out. Well, the reason you take an earn out is because you can get more money.
Right.
I mean, that was the reason I took an earn out.
Yes.
I mean, we had an offer from a major, oil supply company everyone knows that was all cash, significantly less. And Stephen was representing me back in those days. And, we went back to him and said, hey, just come up a little bit.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be the full amount of what the earn out will be, but just come up another $1 million. And they didn't want to do that.
Wow.
So, people ask, why did you do that? Why would you assume that risk? Well, that's why. And if you are willing to assume it, you can get more money.
Yeah. That's what happened with our strategic buyer. They offer significantly less, or actually, you're right. It was about a couple million less for them. And I was asking them to come up also. But the way they structured that was here's the cash, walk away. There was more of an opportunity with the buyer that we chose, and it included an earnout, 2 earnouts actually.
Yeah.
And so,
and you made the first one, so
just found out we made the first one.
Yeah, good for you.
Yes, that was a nice payout.
Yeah, good. So I mean, it's good that you. It usually is a pretty easy discussion, but it's also something that has to be explained because it's new territory for everybody. That there's so much structures and different ways. Because like when we put it all on the spreadsheet, you're going, wow, this one's this way. But you're right. It's a lot of different things that come into play to make that decision. There's fit too.
Right.
That's kind of what I wanted to talk about next. So you're there running it. You're working with, you went from 100% owner to a percentage owner now, but you're still running everything. And I think that's a little something that people don't. I mean, I did exactly the same thing.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I stayed 2 years and had private equity that, but it changed. But I actually enjoyed that phase of it because I felt like I did it with less pressure. I didn't know if you had the same feelings, or kind of tell me about how you think about that now.
About
And
the
what is the
pressure of
day?
running
And
it.
yeah, the pressure of running, and how does the day in a life look as compared? Is it pretty much
Okay.
the same?
So one thing that we had talked about before was the fact that now if there's a problem, it's our problem, not just,
That was a big
just
one for
my
me.
problem. Yes. Takes a lot off your chest, and you can go and you can bounce it off of each other and say, how do you guys want to handle this? You guys are the majority owner. Here's the new situation. But so after the sale, it was a really good feel and like a milestone when that check came in and you looked at your bank account and you're like, wow, this is real.
Yeah.
And, running the business now day to day for us it's the two new investors, owners. They live in other states and I'm running the whole thing still as is.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's
Mhm.
changed there. And it's really just a conversation every couple of weeks that we
Mhm.
have on Zoom and talk about how the business is doing and maybe implement new things and to try to make the company grow. But for the most part, it is more relaxing.
Yeah.
Not all the pressure's on us or me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that takes some of
And
the
they,
risk
and in
away.
my case, they brought a few resources. The pressure was the number one for me too.
Yes.
I always use the term, because as the 100% owner and the entrepreneur with not as much financial backing, generally, usually, always, you're always like, wow, it's all on you. So the fact I really felt that too. The fact that it's like we got sued, or
Yeah,
we this, or we what are
right.
we gonna do?
Yes. Yeah.
That is something that's
It's,
hard for me. That was as much as the money for me.
mhm.
The moment that happened, I was like, wow. I mean, the money, you wouldn't do it without the money,
Yeah.
but also
Right.
the sense of that was really when like you said, when the bank account comes through, is the only time I go, wow, I really did have all the risk in one bucket, didn't I?
Yes.
But it took all the way to that point
Yeah.
to see that,
To
which
see
is,
that. Yeah.
it's kind of funny that it takes that long,
Yeah. But like you pointed that out before it even happened, though. You said that you're going to feel that when that comes about. And sure enough, when one of the big first problems happened, I remember getting on the call and saying, okay, guys, how do we want to handle this?
And you remember what that looked like before. That was you and Sandra in the kitchen going,
Yes.
shit.
Here's what's happening,
Yeah.
right? Here's what's happening. Well, what are we going to do? And how does this affect us? And now it's really affecting everybody.
So but your work day is
Mhm.
similar, right? I mean, you hadn't changed that other than you may be a little more busy, huh?
A little more busy.
Yeah.
The revenue's gone up, more customers, but nothing's really changed. I'm still running the whole thing. And that's the good part about it. And I heard a lot of negative connotations also about selling to venture capitalists or private equity groups that they're going to be, down your throat. This is not the case for our sale. And I'm going to suggest that anybody that's going to sell their business, if it is to any type of party, get some references, check
Mm.
what companies they bought
Yeah.
and see what
Yeah.
their day to day after the sale is like. And, if they're high pressure and they're stressed and don't do it, they say, I'll tell you,
Right.
that might become part of your equation on who you sell to.
Sure. And in my case too, it was a situation where I didn't really know where the growth capital was going to come from. It was a
Mm.
little bit different than, although, you had some of that too, but so, I mean, I wouldn't have been able to accomplish the same thing. Cause I've had people tell me, cause since we sold, a large majority of almost all of the stake in it,
Mm-hmm.
man, I bet, and then we ended up selling it again for a lot more money. I bet you're just kicking yourself in the butt, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is I wouldn't have grown that fast.
Right.
There's no way.
Right.
I had different resources. I had a different outlook. I mean, they just basically said, go grow the company.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to watch all this stuff now,
Yep.
and that
Without the risks.
without the risk was 100% because it's like, oh, wait a minute. I'm not personally guaranteeing every new outlet or every new lease at a new state that we were doing. I'm like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow, I can do this. I
Yeah.
want one on every corner, guys, if y'all want one.
Yes.
So that absolutely is the different. Yeah. And I think a lot of times owners don't know they're competing in a world against people sometimes that have those resources.
Mm-hmm.
I know I didn't realize that.
Right.
I mean, I thought you just went to the bank to get money.
Yeah.
And when they said no, there was no more money. You
What do you
tapped
mean?
out.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, oh, okay. Well, I guess everyone then did not realizing that you may
Mm.
be competing with somebody over here that has lots of
Lots of
money now,
money.
and they view the money as completely different than you and I viewed the money
Right.
when we started in our bedroom and
Yeah.
having to, or even when you go out and like in my case, I tapped out a line of credit.
Hmm.
I mean, we were paying it on time and all that. Not that. It's just they didn't want to give us any more,
Well,
even though we had a great plan that ultimately ended up working.
yes.
But couldn't have did it without
Yeah.
the deal. It's kind of like the letter back to the representation and all. It's like letters of intent. I mean, I learned so much about that
Hmm.
that I didn't, thinking the letter meant buy. That was how naive I was. I've got 7 letters here.
The LOI?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the LOI says buy. That's done deal.
Yeah.
Having no idea that was so far from a
That's
done
just
deal.
the beginning.
That's just the beginning.
Yeah.
We see
Yep.
that.
Yep.
And that's why we tell the owners to keep working, which you did a good
Yep.
job of doing.
Hmm.
You just kept your head down and kept
Got to keep
pushing
plugging.
and plugging and pushing
Got to keep
away
plugging. Yes.
to make it to where not only was it a good transaction of the current numbers, you was actually going up,
Right. And the thing is, you don't want to give up, because if something really, really good happens along the way and you're not at the end of the road yet, that's going to drive the value up too.
Well, I remember we had that airport job. You
Yes.
had, like, I know a bit of concern for you, rightfully so, was holy cow, I've got this job,
Big job.
that if I just delayed the sale or something, I could collect that anyway. So we had to
Right.
go back and negotiate that in to where
Yes.
you actually, and that's something I think other owners don't realize too, that as long as you're growing the business and going up, buyers don't mind paying you for that
Hmm.
if it's negotiated properly.
Right.
And they really don't mind you making the earnouts because they've baked the earnout in. The bonus they're going to pay you. And if you go backwards and you don't make it, then no one's happy.
Nobody's happy.
You didn't make an
You're
earnout,
not
but
happy.
believe me, they're not
They're
happy
not happy,
either.
right.
Because that's what I found it, a few times I've had to tell others, like, listen, they don't buy you to get the same money they gave you.
No.
They buy
No.
you to get more money.
And they want to see that.
And they want to see that.
Yeah.
And it's understandably so. Okay, so we talked about the sense of relief and all that. And what if anything would you do different? You got any of those?
In the
I mean, I know
process,
you've
or
already.
as an entrepreneur?
Oh, well, let's do both. I mean, I want to talk about the process, but we can. That's a good point. Would you? I've never really said. Well, there's a couple of things I might. But go ahead. What would you, if you got something?
As an entrepreneur, I for sure would have put a buffer between me, as you grow and you're able to afford it, more of a buffer between myself and the salespeople or other personnel, so that you can focus more on growing the company. Because as an entrepreneur, you first start off, you're the salesperson.
Yep.
And then you start to get your base of sales, and you might bring somebody else on, and you need to relieve some of that and let some of that go, as well as some of the daily tasks, which they're hard to give up as an entrepreneur, because you're controlling
Extremely hard.
and you want it done your way, and you like the way it's being done.
And you generally are better at it.
You as an entrepreneur, you like to believe that.
Well, you got there.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that would be a real big one for me, because if you don't put that buffer and take some of that stress off of yourself, it'll make you crazy a little bit, because you're trying to handle everything, and you need to learn to relinquish some of them duties.
Yeah, it took me. It's funny you said that, because I didn't get that lesson until we had that equity money.
There you go.
Because, like I was just telling the story before we come back from the break, that I came in, I used to know everything that happened there.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yeah.
And then the equities, position with me was go make more business, all these cool ideas, and make new ones. There's basically almost an unlimited budget if it makes sense. And we've got CFOs now, and you don't need to be here. And I came in from a trip. I was looking around and people were busy, just humping it. And I'm like, I don't even know what the hell anybody is doing. I used to know what everybody's doing. I don't know what anybody is doing.
And everything that was happening, you used to know, and then
Had no idea. There's whole divisions of doing something over here that New states being opened up. I didn't know,
Yeah.
but the reality to your point is that's how, in my case, our company went from 8 million to 34 million in 26
Wow.
months. But the only reason that happened is because you had to trust, but it was really incredibly hard. And I think it's hard for
Yeah.
any entrepreneur to let go.
Hmm.
But the reality is you reach a size, and I think that was for me one of the things that did help having private equity sort of change that equation, because it's hard to let go like
Hmm.
that. And but the reality, we're not going to grow as fast without it. And so to your point, you probably,
Absolutely.
if you would have adhered to that, you probably would have grown faster.
Right. Absolutely. If you don't relinquish some of the duties and take on people and trust them, you have to trust them to do the job. There's going to be some errors that are going to happen. It might cost some money with those errors, hopefully not expensive,
Okay.
but you have to learn to trust, because that's the only way you're going to grow quicker.
Mhm.
If you try to hold on to everything and do everything yourself, your growth will not be as substantial as it might be bringing other people on, if you can afford it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of what I focus on them a bit with the owners with the Next Life too, is say, try to think backwards here.
Mm.
Try to think, where do you want to get to?
I like
And
that.
and the problem is most times we haven't had a chance to do that
Hmm.
because you're just so busy in the moment doing
Mhm.
everything on some level. Whether you should or shouldn't be is another,
Hmm.
question. But I know that's what and then it's like, oh, you're right. I do have to I am going to end up somewhere, maybe I should start thinking about that.
Right. And
So,
after all these years, when you get to that point where you are now and you look back, it's a great question. What would you have done differently? And I think it's that when you get the funds to be able to hire people, don't be afraid to hire them. Hire good people, have them help you, and you will face exponential growth compared to what you would do if you're just trying to do everything yourself, is the
mhm.
way I feel.
So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
100%. So if you were an owner came to you independently and said, man, I'm thinking about selling, what advice would you give him?
Well, first I would tell them, I would, I
On
would,
all levels, not just, hey, go use these people, but
on all levels. I like that. Okay. I would absolutely tell him to find himself a good M&A broker, sit down and think, are you ready? Why are you selling? Um, and go through the whole financial picture with, when it's done, what does it look like for you?
hmm
Will it be adequate?
yeah, yeah.
And then do the equations that you did of, okay, if I feel that the value of my business is around here, will that be enough money? If not,
hmm
how long do I got to work to get that money? So what would I tell them? It's a long process. You're going to reach deal fatigue several
Yeah,
times
it's a real thing.
through it. If you get an educated buyer and you're educated in the process itself, it's a long, tedious process. However, it's very rewarding in the end.
hmm
And if you think your business is not sellable, I feel differently. I think there's somebody out there for you,
Sure,
and go look for it.
sure.
Yeah.
So I know, starting to think about, life after. Is there any thing that's rattling around in your head that, man, I really want to go spend some more time doing this? I mean, I know you've got another year with your gig now to really
Hmm.
push it to where y'all want to get to, but is there things that you have done even now or want to be, you're thinking, man, this is going to be cool? Or is that sort of chapter two? Doesn't have to be. I know it took me, I didn't have one initially. I
Yeah.
just kind of did the equity gig and pushed through like you're doing for the time that I'd committed to.
Hmm.
And then I had to sort of figure it out from there,
Yeah.
you know?
I'm still so busy that
Yeah.
I haven't nailed down what I really want to do in chapter two. There is going to be a chapter two, but
Yeah.
I
You're
just
too
don't.
young, man. We're too young. Let me say it
Yeah,
that way, because
there
we're the
you go.
same age.
We're the same exact age. I still have a lot of energy, and I'm not one that can just sit on that couch
That's why I'm
idle.
asking now. I know you can't.
I know. So it's going to include some travel when I'm done for a little bit, and then
hmm
something's going to hit me in the face, and I'm going to take it on.
I think that's the best way to
Yeah,
approach it.
I want it just to come to me. It'll be some type of business, maybe not, maybe something that is easier. I don't know what that is yet, but
Yeah,
We'll
well,
see.
I'll school you on a few angel things not to do.
Yeah, I
I
know
did an
one of them.
angel investment that didn't work out, so I can give you a not to list in that.
Hmm.
But I think that's a great approach because I think that's part of the fear that owners have
Hmm.
is something that I always try to address because a lot of owners
Hmm.
generally are great people to have a second life because we're usually not sit around the couch and you're
Right,
very much type A people anyway.
right.
Now I guess if the only way you identified with yourself was that work or that business, then but that's pretty damn one dimensional.
Hmm.
Just like I enjoy business a lot,
Hmm.
I don't want to go back to a business that has a lot of employees in the same,
Right.
and I've had opportunities in my old industry to do that, but I mean I love what I'm doing now. I can sort of
Hmm.
it's a hybrid, but I had to find my way to that. So I think that's a great advice to
Yeah.
the way to think about it is just, because we're, you don't know.
Right. And the other part that's kind of exciting to think about for me as well, when I find that chapter two and that second opportunity, I think I'm just gonna have so much more knowledge to make it happen. I think quicker and easier and better. Sure, I might have to learn a different industry, but the facets of business itself, we know now.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think that will be easier to, you won't second guess so many of your decisions that you're making maybe
Hmm.
in the onset of your first business. And I think it'll help it grow quicker. And I'm hoping for that.
Well, an experience. I mean, there's no
Yeah.
question. I mean, you know yourself and I do. Those scars and nicks and stuff are real. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and you, like I always say, I'm not done making mistakes.
Mm.
I'll touch the hot stove again, but I don't touch it in the same spot. You're gonna be
The
like,
hot stove. I
yeah,
like
like,
it.
oh, don't touch it there. Okay,
That's funny.
yeah, I remember that. Oh, yeah, don't do that now. But like you said, it's second acts, and I think a lot of owners, I've run across them sometimes, and they're fearful because maybe they have this image of their grandparent or something just dying in front of the
Mm.
TV with nothing to do, But if you do it right, and you've calculated what the right amount of money is for you to live the life that you want to
Mm-hmm.
live, then you're gonna generally you should have enough money to where that's not a big issue. Financial is not an issue. So then it's about, just going out and doing stuff and
Right.
you're gonna and whether it be other business or not. I mean, everyone's different. Some people I have a friend that's old and he doesn't want any part of anything to do with work again. And that's fine. That's what
He's
works
older
for
than
him.
us.
Not much. But I don't know, it's funny because I said that initially and I didn't really do much of nothing that first year
Mm. And
to,
that's
to your
okay.
point. And that's kind of, I said to
Yeah.
myself, that's okay, whatever.
Yeah.
I don't care. I'm not under pressure to do it. And that was fun. And now I did reach that point after a year. I was like, okay, wow, I need to knock around and do some stuff. Cause earning to
Right.
me is fun and it is to you too.
Right.
I know you personally as well. And
Yes.
yeah, you'll find something like that.
And I think since we're out there talking to entrepreneurs, you guys, we all work so hard. Enjoy it as well. Take your time and enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let the business own you and run you.
Yeah,
Take that time away at times and learn to enjoy the life because it's going to go by fast.
it
And I
does.
do know some entrepreneurs that have sold their business, and within 8 months later, they were gone, and they really never had time to enjoy all the hard work that they did.
Oh, yeah. I,
So,
I I had one client from a couple of years ago, or maybe a year and a half ago. I think he was in the early 70s, and that was kind of my question
mm,
to him: is why did you finally call? And his comment was, "Well, I thought about all that stuff you said, and I had my grandson on my lap, and
there you
I
go.
wasn't around, and the son was actually there, and the son says, hell no, we were working every Christmas Eve,
Yeah.
and the son said, I didn't want to live that life, but the reality is, this guy was much older than us. So I do
Mm.
think about that too. You start thinking, I'm reading a book right now about living to 100 or
Oh,
or
yeah.
being able to at least have a quality of life into your late 90s. And
Hmm.
it does start, and I think that's something to for an owner. That doesn't mean to absolutely do it either. I
Yeah.
hate it when someone says you have to sell, you have to do this. You don't have to do
No.
anything. but you ought to at least think what that might look like
Right.
for you, whatever that is for you.
Right. Consider it.
Well,
Just
because
consider
you're
it.
going to exit.
Yeah. At some point, you're going to have to.
You're
Right.
going to exit.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know,
Whether you
Pine
like it or
Box
not.
or Earn or however you want to go,
Yeah.
but you're not going to be there. So.
Yeah. And when you start to think about that exit, again, the process, having a professional on your side, I can't push that enough. Really, really helps out.
Yeah.
It'll take so much off of you because you have to continue running your business, and the process can tie you down, but that professional can make it a lot easier for you.
Yeah, I 100% believe that from experience doing it and now working on side of. I mean, I tell people you have to do this. I mean, whether you use us or anyone else, you have to do that.
Yeah.
You know? So you'd be crazy not to. So.
Mm-hmm.
Well, great. I think that's everything to talk about. Unless
Good.
we got any stories we probably can't put on camera now. That's it. All right. Well, thanks for being here, Paul.
Thank you, Gary. Enjoyed it.